seriously popular.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Welcome back to MAGAland. Kelly, we didn't plan this, but we're wearing similar outfits.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. That's right. You got to wear your green.
I do not like this holiday, and I actually did this by mistake, but oh well, here I am, green and ready. We have a full show for you, of course, like always after the weekend. We're going to discuss deportations of alleged gang leaders to El Salvador. Trump declares Biden's pardons void, and Chuck Schumer has angered Democrats by voting for the GOP's proposed budget. But first, we have a very special interview with Axios senior political reporter Alex Isenstadt. We'll be back right after the break.
This episode is brought to you by Prime Video. In the small town of Holland, Michigan, nothing is ever what it seems. Behind the tulip festivals and pretty houses lay dark secrets that threaten to tear a marriage apart. Nicole Kidman stars in this darkly twisted thriller about a wife and mother whose quest to uncover her husband's secrets may get her more than she bargained for. Holland, streaming on Prime Video March 27th.
Welcome to MAGAland.
And we're back in MAGAland. We have a special guest joining us today, Alex Isenstadt with Axios, who has a brand new book coming out tomorrow, actually. It's called Revenge, the inside story of Trump's return to power. And DailyMail.com actually broke several exclusives out of your original reporting, Alex. Our reporter, Nikki Schwab, reported on some pretty juicy tidbits earlier this month. You may remember that we had a story live about Trump's human printer, Natalie Harp, and her position within the Trump orbit. Let's start with that, Alex. Our readers, our listeners are extremely intrigued with Natalie Harp, the human printer. And you have some really interesting details about her position amid the other Trump aides and also some of her shadowy movements on Air Force One.
So Natalie Harp is someone who plays an extremely important role in Trump world, but she's a lower profile figure, right? A lot of people don't know her name as well as other more prominent members of Trump's inner circle. However, she is a very important figure because she is someone who, as you mentioned, is known as the human printer. And what that means is that she always prints out articles for Trump. That's how he reads articles, right? This is a guy who's a creature of the 1980s. And so he's much more likely to read something that's given to him on a piece of paper than, say, on his iPhone, right? And so she prints out articles and gives them to him. This is really important because she kind of manages the information flow to him in Trump world, or she has a very important role in managing information flow to him. Whatever she prints out gets in front of his eyes. Sometimes those can be controversial articles that then wind up getting truth socialed out. And some of those articles will be known by your readers as some of the ones that have gotten Trump into a little bit of trouble because maybe some of them are conspiratorial, some of them are controversial. So a lot of those things that you see coming from are from Natalie Harp. What is also interesting about Natalie Harp, though, is that she is seen by many in Trump's orbit as somewhat obsessive towards him. You guys know this as having watched him, monitored him, reported on him for as long as you have. There are a lot of people who are trying to curry favor and get his attention. But Natalie Harp takes it to a different level. And she is someone who is always looking to be in proximity to him, always looking to be by his side, to the point where it really rankled a lot of aides. And she developed a reputation as being like the Glenn Close character in Fatal Attraction, who many of your listeners will remember was someone who was obsessive towards the actor Michael Douglas.
Can you tell us a little bit about her encounter with Melania?
There was an incident. Trump was in his quarters at Mar-a-Lago one night. Everyone in Trump's orbit knows to tread very carefully. Late in the evenings when he's in his quarters, that's a very private location. There was an incident that happened during the campaign where Natalie Harp went to Trump's quarters to deliver some printouts for him. And it was late in the evening, and she ran into Melania Trump. Melania was startled by this encounter, as you might expect. This wasn't the first time that Natalie Harp did a breach of boundaries, so to speak. There was an incident where on Trump's plane one day, Trump was not on this particular flight. He was on a different plane. Everyone was on Trump Force One. There's a small area where he has his own bedroom where he can lay down on a bed. She went into this area. And it's an area that's known among Trump's inner circle as a place where no one dares to go. It is a very private area. And so it's an example of how a lot of people on the campaign saw Natalie Harp as intruding upon boundaries in order to get proximity to Trump.
You have a lot of information about Trump's behavior on the plane and some great quotes included in your book. I want to put some of them by you and have you explain to our listeners what was going on there.
Sure.
I'm going to start with the one that shocked me the most because, wow, what a character. Apparently, Trump really took issue with then RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel's hair and said, honey, I need to fix this before taking matters into his own hands. Tell us about this moment, because we talk here about how Trump, first of all, is a showman and then president. So can you tell me about this crazy moment?
This incident happened in October 2023. It was during the campaign, the primary season, the height of the primary season, and Trump and Ronna McDaniel were both backstage at the Republican Jewish Coalition Conference in Las Vegas. Ronna McDaniel is about to speak, and Trump comes over. Essentially, what he says is, your hair is not quite ready for prime time. He grabs a bottle of hairspray. And all your listeners know this. Trump is very much into his hair and hairspray and making sure that his hair is presented in a very particular way. He's always been like this, right? He sprays this hairspray onto Ronna McDaniel's hair. She goes out on stage and her hair did not move. It did not move. It was a shell. This is sort of an illustration, though, of how Trump is always fixated on visuals and how he is willing to interact with people on visuals. I think one of the things that your listeners will see if they read this book, and I hope they do, Trump is very fixated on what people who work for him wear. At one point in the book, he gifts Chris LaCivita a shirt from Brooks Brothers. There are other incidents, other moments in this book where he remarks on people's clothing. Visuals and attire are very important to Donald Trump.
A few of the craziest quotes that made it on your book are about the same person, Ron DeSantis, someone who maybe they could have been allies at one point, but these quotes will show you that Trump does not like the man who he said, I'm going to squash this guy like a bug, and then said about DeSantis, he was like a beggar. I could have said, drop to your effing knees, Ron. Tell us about how Trump sees Ron DeSantis and how Ron messed up that opportunity to maybe work with Trump and be a MAGA, the next MAGA president, perhaps.
So these quotes are important because they reveal something about Trump's mindset towards Ron DeSantis. In Trump's view, Ron DeSantis owes him for winning the governorship. And I'll tell you, in this case, Trump may be right. Ron DeSantis was running for governor in 2018. And DeSantis came to Trump, really lobbied very hard for his endorsement. DeSantis knew that Trump's endorsement would make or break his prospects at winning the Republican primary. So Trump goes ahead and endorses DeSantis. DeSantis ends up winning the primary. Trump always felt like DeSantis, to some extent, or to a large extent really, was indebted to him for winning that primary. Then DeSantis turns around and ends up challenging Trump for the Republican nomination in 2024. Trump was infuriated by that. And Trump also assesses people is through loyalty. He came to feel very bitterly towards DeSantis.
The role that Barron Trump plays. He seems to be one of the only people in Trump's circle and his family who can give him tough feedback and tough criticism, and Trump actually listens. Take us inside Barron's piece of advice to Trump before his debate with Biden.
This is a really interesting moment, which is you go back to that debate against Biden in June of 2024. At that point, the race was very close. No one really knew how things were going to shake out. And so Barron goes to Trump and he says, Dad, you talked too much in one of your debates against Joe Biden in 2020, and you just need to talk less this time. And that's something that Trump really took to heart. right? You look back at that debate that Trump had against Biden, and he talked far less and he was far more disciplined than he was in his debates against Biden in 2020, when he came under a lot of criticism for talking too much, speaking too loudly, for interrupting. Barron told Trump, don't interrupt as much, don't talk as much. And Trump ended up following through on that advice.
I don't think we've ever seen Trump, as you said, so disciplined. As you said, at that moment, it was not a given that Trump was going to get back to the White House. At one point, we really thought that January 6th was going to be a no-no for a lot of the people who supported him the first time around. Writing your book, analyzing all of this, was that debate the moment that brought Trump back to the White House, or what was that point of inflection that took him there?
That was clearly an inflection point. I think there were several inflection points. One is the debate against Biden, which was huge. Another was the shooting. The shooting and Trump's decision in that moment to raise his fist after he was shot created an indelible moment and something that was really seared into the American public's consciousness. One of the things I talk about in this book is that one of the reasons Trump has such a strong base of support is because his supporters see him as a fighter. Trump in that moment just knew what he wanted to do. And by raising his fist, that was an incredibly powerful symbolic moment. So I think that was clearly another inflection point in this campaign.
Alex, take us inside how you came up with this book idea and just your experience reporting on Trump, MAGAland, the characters that we talk about so frequently on the podcast. How is it working with them every day? And how is it to really get inside and get the really juicy bits?
So I started writing this book in February 2023, just when the campaign was kicking off. And at that point, it was far from certain that Trump was going to be even the Republican nominee. Your listeners will remember that he had this dinner with Kanye West that was very controversial. He was being blamed for the Republican Party's lesser than stellar performance in the 2018 midterms. So he was kind of at an ebb, right? And I decided to write this book because I knew that, and everyone knew that, it was going to be a fascinating campaign, right? No matter what happened, there was going to be plenty of drama and it would be an incredible story. Of course, none of us knew what exactly was going to happen. And it ended up being an even more dramatic race than any of us could have imagined. But my goal was to take readers behind the scenes, to help them understand the story, to be a fly on the wall. And I went to a lot of people who were in and around this campaign, and I said, look, I want to just tell the story of what happens. I'm not coming to this in a particularly partisan way. I'm not coming to this as a conservative or as a liberal, but just to tell the story and to let people in. And what I found was that a lot of people really wanted to tell their stories, that they understood that this would be history and that it would be an historical document. I really appreciated their willingness to share those stories with me because I think that this was an incredibly historic campaign. And I think it's incredibly important that the American public knows what happened in this campaign.
Here in MAGAland, we have really learned that whoever is close to Trump, as you have mentioned now, really has a pull on him, which is why his advisors are always concerned about who gets his ear before what. So today, Alex, who are Trump's top 4 people?
You have to look at Susie Wiles as being first and foremost his most trusted advisor. He respects Susie Wiles. She created a very organized, functional apparatus for him during the 2024 campaign. It was more functional than he had in his 2016 campaign. It was more functional than what he had in his 2020 campaign. And it was certainly more functional than what he had during his first term in the White House. There's another really important figure in this book, though, and Steve Witkoff is that person. Steve Witkoff right now is Trump's envoy to the Middle East. They've known each other since the 1980s. They were both big real estate developers in New York. Trump trusts Witkoff as a developer. There's one scene in the book where Steve Witkoff is golfing with Trump during that second assassination attempt at Trump's golf club. Steve Witkoff now is playing an incredibly important role in Trump's foreign policy. He's Trump's Mideast envoy. He's been negotiating with Russia. He's been negotiating in the Middle East. And so you look at him as being an incredibly important figure as well, I think, who has Trump's ear right now.
Most Americans don't really know who he is. Do you see him as being someone who's going to last a long time in Trump's orbit? Do you think that if these talks don't go well, Trump could turn on him?
Someone really important in Trump's first term, who all your listeners will know, told me one time that no one's safe forever in Trump world. No one's safe. Anyone could get fired anytime. But Steve Witkoff does have something that a lot of people don't, which is this 4-decade-long relationship with Trump. One of the things that Trump really appreciates about Steve Witkoff is that if you go back to after January 6th, a lot of Trump's longtime friends ditched him. They wouldn't take his calls. They didn't want to have anything to do with him, except for Steve Witkoff. And Steve Witkoff never once asked Trump about his role on January 6th. He was incredibly loyal to him. Trump saw that and appreciated that. And they were inseparable throughout the campaign. They were together all the time. And that illustrates the importance that Steve Witkoff plays in Trump's world. And so no one's safe. But Steve Witkoff has something that other cabinet members don't have, which is this long-standing, decades-long relationship with Trump.
We have learned that loyalty is number one for the president. Alex, I'm also going to have to ask you, because here in Welcome to MAGAland, we are always wondering what Melania is really thinking. How is their relationship? You mentioned when I saw your reporting that the human printer ran into her. I'm like, oh, so Melania is there. She is around. Tell us, how often is she around? Do they have a romantic relationship? What is the state of their marriage?
Here's something that I talk about in the book as well, which is that she is an incredibly important advisor to Donald Trump. There would be aides who would call up Trump in the evenings to talk about things with him, and he would have the phone on speaker, and Melania Trump would be there right next to him in the conversation. When Trump was reinstated by Elon Musk on Twitter in 2023, Trump was thinking about making his first inaugural tweet a response to Ron DeSantis announcing his campaign, and Trump wanted to go on Twitter and attack DeSantis. Melania advised him that doing so, making that his inaugural tweet, would make him look small and like he was responding to DeSantis. She also gives him stylistic advice, which is not surprising because she's someone who's very much into appearances and presentation, of course. One of the things that she doesn't like that Trump does is he dances at his rallies.
People love that. Melania doesn't like it. People love it.
She doesn't like it. But what this illustrates is that she plays a quiet but important role in Trump world. And he trusts her and he respects her.
I find that so interesting because Trump, I think, can be misogynistic in many ways through his past statements and whatnot, but he does like powerful women, no?
It's a good point. And if you look at that and you look at Susie Wiles, who is his chief of staff, the interesting thing about Melania is that for a lot of the campaign, she was more focused on Barron, getting him off to NYU. And so being a mom was still really important to her. She doesn't necessarily like politics that much, right? She's someone who will show up at a donor event once in a while. But in a lot of ways, her scarcity creates value. Donors want to be around her. When she's going to an event, that's a huge attraction because she's not there as much, right? Trump, he's holding press conferences every day and he's totally out there all the time, right? But when she's present at something, it gets a lot of eyeballs. And I think she knows that.
She knows that. She totally knows that, I think. And as we are here in MAGAland, every time she appears, we got to note it because she's in high demand. So thank you, Alex. But Alex is actually going to stay with us for the rest of the show as we discuss all the new developments in MAGAland right after this break.
Are your ulcerative colitis symptoms proving difficult to manage? Tremfya guselkumab can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. At 1 year, many patients taking Tremfya achieved clinical remission, and some patients also achieved endoscopic remission. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Ask your doctor if Tremfya can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
And we're back in MAGAland, and there has been a lot of drama in the last 24 hours, this time over Trump's recent deportation flights of Venezuelan gang members back to El Salvador. A lot of drama unfolded a lot of confusion. So let's break it down. It appears that Trump had several flights carrying about 200 illegal gang members who were in the country back to El Salvador. And while they were in flight, a judge said you cannot actually make these deportations. There's been a lot of discussion on whether Trump willfully ignored the judge's order to stop and turn around the planes, or if they were already in flight or they had already landed. The White House says that they were already in flight, so the judge's order doesn't apply here. What's going on?
Axios had exclusive reporting on that by Mark Caputo. I wanted to note, though, as a Venezuelan, I have to do it. These gang members are all suspected. There's no judge that has said they're members of El Tren de Aragua. This is really concerning for a lot of Venezuelan families who say they have relatives who have now been sent to El Salvador against a judge's order, and they say they're not gang members. Again, these people have not been convicted of being gang members. But Alex, please tell us about that last-minute court order that El Salvador's president mocked and kind of retweeted something and said, oops, too late, they're already here. So what the heck happened there, Alex?
It's interesting because he's doing this with tariffs too, right? Which is he's going to push ahead no matter the cost. He's going to be fighting judges. He's going to be pushing back against countries that don't want tariffs. He is determined to push through his agenda. This is what happened in his first term, which is that judges pushed back on some of the immigration moves that he made then. You have the same thing happening now. This time around with tariffs, you have pushback from the business community. You have pushback from other countries. He's pushing ahead on that as well. What these incidents really show is that he feels like right now he has a tremendous amount of political capital to pursue the agenda that he campaigned on. And he feels like he has nothing to lose because he doesn't have to run for re-election again. And so he also has an administration around him that is led by Susie Wiles that wants to ensure that he is putting forward and that he is really completing what he campaigned on. They feel like there are going to be judges, there's a legal system that's going to give them pushback, but they're going to push right back as well.
I thought it was interesting. The White House put out a video trolling the whole situation just a few minutes ago. It was video of some of these illegal aliens who were being flown on the flights, and it was set to the soundtrack of Closing Time, which is crazy, but we've seen the White House do this before, trolling the media narrative, the pushback that they're getting by putting out some farther out there social media clips. So I think you're quite right. Trump's going to do what Trump wants to do, and this is a perfect example of that.
I'm from Venezuela, where a leader was elected with a mandate, and then he proceeded to dismantle the institutions, saying they're corrupt. These judges are going against the will of the people, which is what Elon Musk has been saying on Twitter a lot. Every time a judge like this one goes against a Trump order, he says we have to impeach these judges. They're going against democracy. This is how the modern dismantling of democracy happens. Alex, would Trump move to that, the impeachment of judges? He has already been naming them. What is the next step in this battle between the executive and the judicial? And is it going to get authoritarian?
Trump has always rallied his supporters against the judicial system. Trump portrays the judicial system as being part of this elite class that is aligned against him and his interests, and also aligned against the interests of his supporters. He likes creating this contrast, right? He likes creating this fight. And you saw him do this last week, right? He goes to the DOJ and gives a speech. It's unheard of for a sitting president to go to the DOJ and give a speech. There's supposed to be arm's length between these two branches, right? Trump is determined to cross over that. You see him at the FBI and at the DOJ, they're pushing out prosecutors who played a role in the January 6th case. And so you definitely see this big clash that's underway between Trump and the judicial class. And there's no sign that it's not going to intensify going forward.
I used to work at DOJ for Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr, and Trump never came to the Justice Department once. White House officials generally stay away. There is supposed to be this sort of level of respect and, as you say, arm's distance links. So it was shocking and really quite unprecedented that he was delivering a speech at the Great Hall in front of all these prosecutors, bemoaning the weaponized justice system against him. And it was over an hour. It felt more like a campaign style speech than a law and order speech.
He hated his first term judicial warriors, the ones you just mentioned. So now this time around, he's like, oh, these guys are not going to stop me again.
Right. Jeff Sessions, he recused himself from the Russia investigation. And that's what started this major rift, this rupture in their relationship.
Disloyalty.
Right. Trump wanted Sessions to fight for him on the Russia investigation, and he felt like Sessions was disloyal.
I also want you guys to explain to me the other thing that happened over the weekend, which is Trump saying that Biden's pardons are simply void. Huh? Kelly, what is happening? Because I'm freaking out now.
Trump said that the Biden pardons that he issued at the tail end of his presidency, including those for Dr. Fauci, Liz Cheney, a lot of other Biden allies who were in the direct line of Trump's wrath and who still are. Trump is saying because of this auto pen drama, all of the pardons that Biden signed are null and void. So what's interesting is if this is true, one, and second of all, if this would also impact Hunter Biden and some of the Biden family members who were also pardoned.
Where do you think this can go, Alex?
It's unclear to me whether what Trump is saying is actually true, whether those pardons are null and void. But what does stick out to me is that he continues to attack Joe Biden every chance he gets. He will not stop going after Joe Biden.
Finally, Hillary has been replaced, no? It used to be Hillary. It seems he finally found a better one than Hillary.
Right. To me, what it suggests is that Trump, to the extent that he faces challenges in governing, if there's a problem with the economy, if there's another problem that pops up, he has Joe Biden to blame as opposed to incurring any blame himself. To me, what it shows is another example of how he is trying to keep Biden alive as a character so that way he can blame him for anything that goes wrong during his tenure.
And again, going against the constitutional powers and rights of Americans.
At the end of last week, the Senate voted to narrowly avoid a shutdown. And this was a shocking move because at the last second, Chuck Schumer actually said that he would get behind the Trump MAGA Republican push to stop a government shutdown and fund the government through September. Now Schumer is in some hot water with liberals. He was actually forced today to postpone his own book tour because of this backlash. There's been a growing number of individuals who are calling for him to step down from his leadership position within the Democratic Party. Alex, do you think that Schumer is going to fold to this pressure? And do you think that he could be replaced as the top Democrat in the Senate?
Well, it's unclear to me who would replace him.
Well, apparently they're saying AOC, which to me sounds crazy. Like, who is giving them advice? They were already talking about her running against him for the Senate seat over this. It's wild to me.
I mean, some people think she might be more interested in running for another office. But one of the things Schumer's going to have to see is whether he can weather this storm, whether it fades away or whether it only intensifies. But overall, what this whole situation illustrates is the split within the Democratic Party, where you have some people in the party who want to fight Trump and other people in the party who say that they need to be a little bit more pragmatic and a little bit more measured in what approach they take. Schumer finds himself in a bit of a vice here, right? Where he's caught between liberals, many of whom are House Democrats like AOC, who want the party to fight Trump at every turn. And then others in the party who say, look, you got to be a little bit more careful because if you shut down the government, that might play into Trump's hands.
I wanted to note that because that is the battle. And Schumer himself said, we can't have the government shut down. We need the courts working to oppose Trump orders. So like what we were discussing, that right now the legislative is there battling these executive orders. But Alex, we always talk about here, Democrats don't know what to do. This is another great show. Progressives like AOC are now really showing face, saying we have to say no to everything the Republicans say. And then we have other people like Schumer and on the other end now Gavin Newsom who are trying a different strategy to see if they can regain some popularity. What do you know about that battle within the Democratic Party and who do you think will win?
Here's the thing is that people who want to fight Trump are going to be the loudest voices in the room. They're going to appeal the most to the grassroots. They're going to appeal the most to small dollar donors. And so they're an incredibly powerful force in all of this. And it's like AOC is taking the space that the Tea Party took a little bit after Barack Obama was elected.
That is what they are. They are the equivalent of that.
The Tea Party wanted to fight Obama at every turn. And then you had the more establishment ranks of the Republican Party that was a little bit more measured at the time. AOC and Bernie Sanders, they are appealing to a grassroots sentiment that they want to fight Trump on every single thing he does. And right now, they're the louder voices.
Speaking of Newsom, do you think he has any chances? Because as we mentioned, he has a podcast where he's been talking to people like Steve Bannon, really populist on the right. What we have mentioned ends up happening when a Democrat tries to go moderate. They have the AOC faction attack them and they end up with everyone hating them in the end. Do you think Newsom's move to the center will be helpful for him in his hopes for the presidency, or will it mean the end of his political career?
Newsom's kind of an interesting case because during the campaign, he took a very combative approach towards Trump, right? He was the kind of guy who was out there saying that the party needs to stand up to Trump, that it needs to fight harder against him. And he took a really kind of high profile approach, right? I mean, there was one Republican primary debate that Newsom showed up at in the spin room to speak out against the Republicans who were running. And now you have Newsom taking a little bit of a different approach where he wants to try to understand MAGA. To answer the question, I think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Newsom's show moving forward. There's been some reporting that his next guest is going to be Tim Walz. Does Newsom bend to those in his party who want him to have more Democrats on his show? We'll see what happens on that front.
Another interesting development at the White House today is that UFC fighter Conor McGregor actually appeared behind the White House briefing podium with Caroline Leavitt. Let's take a listen.
And I will say, Conor is here to meet with the president. He'll be meeting with him later this afternoon. We couldn't think of a better guest to have with us on St. Patrick's Day. We're both wearing our green. This was not planned, but very festive. And as you know, I'll be having a briefing later at 1 o'clock, so we'll talk more about their meeting later. But he's going over to meet with some other administration officials. He's spending the day in Washington, D.C.
For sure.
So
I'm here to raise the issues the people of Ireland face, and it'll be music to the people of Ireland's ears, because never on the main stage has the issues the people of Ireland face been spoke. Our government has long since abandoned the voices of the people of Ireland, and it's high time that America is made aware of what is going on in Ireland. What is going on in Ireland is a travesty. Our government is the government of zero action with zero accountability. Our money is being spent on overseas issues that has nothing to do with the Irish people. The illegal immigration racket is running ravage on the country. There are rural towns in Ireland that have been overrun in one swoop, that have become a minority in one swoop. So issues need to be addressed, and the 40 million Irish Americans, as I said, need to hear this, because if not, there will be no place to come home and visit.
During Conor McGregor's brief stint as White House press secretary, he was asked a question actually by dailymail.com about the number of Irish migrants living within the United States. And he had some interesting comments. He said that he hopes that Ireland and America can, quote, remain siblings, and that they wish to be taking care of their big bro, the United States. Interesting that he got this prominent speaking role today.
Don't forget that prominent men, prominent athletes, prominent male podcasters played an important role in this campaign in terms of helping Trump turn out lower propensity voters, right? People who are typically less likely to vote. One of the chapters I have in this book basically says that BRAT summer became bro fall, right? And
That's so good. That's exactly what happened.
Trump spent a lot of time at UFC events. He spent a lot of time at sporting events. It became a big part of his campaign in terms of his effort to appeal to male voters. And it ended up helping him siphon off minority voters and other people who are traditionally in the Democratic column. And so don't underestimate the important role that athletes like Conor McGregor and others played in this campaign. And then you had male broadcasters like Joe Rogan. Trump spent one of his last days on the campaign trail recording a multi-hour interview with Joe Rogan.
You reported about Barron being a good advisor. Barron is the expert on all these huge content creators that helped his dad out, no?
A moment in the book where some of Trump's aides call him and they want to pitch him on this idea of going on podcasts. And he says, ask Barron, and then he hangs up the phone. Barron then played an important role in terms of connecting Trump and getting Trump on podcasters like Patrick Bet-David, which is one of the people that he suggested Trump go on. Barron is very much into that world. He's very much into the Aiden Ross world, very much into these sort of new generation streamers and new generation podcasters. And Trump really played to that during this campaign and really outmaneuvered Kamala Harris on that front.
back in the day, it was that the Republicans didn't know about pop culture, but the last elections, the Democrats have like Beyonce and Taylor Swift, and that only makes them cringy. It's these micro influencers, celebrities of the online world that will swing votes.
If you look at some of the top podcast lists and the top rankings of podcasts, they're kind of dominated by conservatives right now, right? Like Gavin Newsom is actually the new entrant in this. He's actually the most prominent Democratic figure on the top podcast rankings, but he's having on MAGA figures, right? So it's interesting to see how this is playing out.
It's certainly been an interesting discussion with Alex here. Thank you again for joining us in MAGAland, and be sure to check out his new book that comes out tomorrow on March 18. We'll love to have you back to discuss everything going on inside of Trump's White House, which is so fascinating as we discussed today.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Welcome to MAGAland and email us at welcometomagaland@dailymail.com. Bye-bye.